All right, so the last chapter you and I discussed was mitosis. And mitosis, in case you missed that question, was nuclear division. Cell division is just cells dividing, but mitosis is specific to the nucleus dividing. Cytokinesis is when the cytoplasm divides. So that was that last question. Meiosis is another type of cell division, but it's specific to gametes. Does anyone have any idea what a gamete is? Your sexual reproductive cells, sperm and egg. So when we talk about mitosis, and I'll go over some terms here in a little bit, mitosis applies to every cell in your body except for sperm and egg. And you shouldn't have both, but sperm or egg is what I should say. So if it's skin, it's mitosis. If it's bone, it's mitosis. If it's kidney, it's mitosis. But if it is sperm, meiosis. And if it's egg, it's meiosis. Okay? So we talk about meiosis when we're talking about sexual reproduction, where you'll have two organisms coming together or two sex cells coming together in order to form another one. All right? When I go through and teach you this would be a really long lecture if we went through all the details again. Meiosis and mitosis are very similar in some aspects, but I'm going to focus on how they're different. So if I can help you remember how they're different, then hopefully you can recognize that when you're analyzing questions. Okay? So we're not going to talk about spindles attaching to kinetochores and all of that stuff like we did last week, because that all happens the same. What we're going to look at is how meiosis is different than mitosis. Okay? So I started off with a summary slide. The very first thing it says is meiosis is based on the interactions and distribution of homologous chromosome pairs. That's going to be our focus today, and I will explain that as we go through it. But here's the main, when I talk about big picture, it's here in bold. Meiosis produces 4 genetically different daughter cells with half the number of chromosomes. 4 genetically different daughter cells with half the number of chromosomes. How is producing 4 genetically different daughter cells different than mitosis? Mitosis makes 2, and they're genetically identical. They're the exact same. So if I have a skin cell and I want to make a copy of it, I want it to be exactly the same so that my new skin looks identical to my old skin. In your life, if you're a female, you will never make 2 eggs that are the same. And in your life, if you are a male, you will never make 2 sperm that are the same. They will all be different. Which is why when you have siblings that share the same parents, they may have similarities, but they're all just a little bit different. Okay? And it will be like that. Meiosis is the basis of genetic variation. What does genetic variation mean? We're diverse. We're genetically diverse. What is genetics? Your DNA. How do you know that there's genetic diversity between me and Melissa? We don't look the same. If we were genetically identical, we would look the same. We would look the same. Why is it better that her and I aren't the same? Go ahead. Okay, so you can tell us apart for sure. Can you tell me how our population would be affected if we were all genetically identical? Why would there not be many of us? You are exactly right, but why? How our population would be affected. Big picture, you're right, it would decrease in size. Same diseases. I'm 37 years old, we're all genetically identical, and I get cancer. You might be 12, but what does that mean for you? You're going to get cancer. So if we're all suffering from the same thing, one thing will wipe us all out. But because we're genetically different, if I'm 37 years old and get cancer, does that necessarily mean that you're going to get cancer? No, we're different. And what I've exposed myself to is different. than what you've exposed yourself to. So why is genetic variation a crutch or a basis for survival?
So everybody knows you're different.
If we're different, it gives us a better chance of survival. If we're different, it gives us a better chance of surviving. If we were all super smart, then that would be an issue. So we have to have people who are smart and not smart. So that the ones that are not smart, you know where I'm going with that. So it's important that there's genetic variation, that there's different things that help us to be successful. Okay? Now, it mentions here that meiosis, again, is sexual reproduction, or the formation of gametes for sexual reproduction. But sexual reproduction produces an offspring by the union of a male and female gamete. I need you to know the word gamete. So most people say sperm and egg, which is correct, but the question may not say egg or sperm. It may say the female gamete or the male gamete. And gamete is just the word for sex cell. Okay? Can you tell me why these gametes have only half the number of chromosomes?
They combine together?
That is 100% correct. So if one egg has one set of chromosomes, or half the number of chromosomes, and one sperm has another set, or half the number of chromosomes, when they join, they will have two sets of chromosomes together. How many chromosomes are in all of your cells? 46. How many sets? 2. So you need one set from mom and one set from dad. Okay? So gametes are the only cells in your body that will have just one set. Everything else should have 2. Everything else should have 2. Fertilization is the actual fusion of sperm and egg. This is also considered conception, when sperm and egg fuse. For a few hours after sperm and egg fuse, you are truly just one cell. One microscopic cell. And when you are one cell, the term for you at that point is a zygote. A zygote is when a sperm and egg have fused, and that offspring is now just one cell. You are only one cell for a few hours, but there's so many crazy things that happen during that time. Because you are just one cell. You have your mom's DNA and your dad's DNA. And so now you have 46 chromosomes, 2 pair of each. During that time, they decide who's dominant and who's recessive. So your dad gives you an I gene and your mom gives you an I gene. And during that time, one of them is going to decide to be dominant and the other one will be turned off. So if my dad had brown and my mom had blue, my brown gene was turned off, my blue gene was left on, but am I still carrying a brown gene? Yes. And so during that time, all of that is figured out, while you are just one cell. All of that is figured out. Then once that is set, then we'll start to replicate you so that we can form you into you. But we have to get all the information correct first. All the directions for construction there. Okay? So that is what we consider fertilization, and all those activities occur when you are what we refer to as a zygote. Questions so far? Go ahead.
You said that the gamete is a sex cell. And what did you say about being at one set?
It's haploid. It has one set of chromosomes. A gamete is a sex cell, and we refer to it as haploid, meaning it has one set of chromosomes. What does diploid mean? It has 2 sets. Yes, where the 2 have fused. 100% correct. Yes, sir. So I've added this slide because I need you to understand how this applies to you in your life. So in the process of meiosis, we have meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. That is a first indication that during meiosis, the cell divides 2 times. How many times does it divide during mitosis? Once. So a difference. Okay? So we have our stem cell, and you can see that it's diploid, designated by the fact that it says 2N. N means a set of chromosomes, so 2N means 2 sets of chromosomes. During interphase, G1S and G2. What happens to get me from here to looking like this? Not yet, not meiosis just yet. During interphase, there's G1S and G2. What has happened to this cell to make it look like this? Synthesis. What happens during synthesis? It replicates the DNA. DNA is replicated. So I started off with one of each, but remember I have to make an identical copy. So I have my sister chromatids. So that happened during interphase, specifically S. All right? Then the rest of meiosis will occur, and it'll sound the same. Prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1. And it will split. And I will point out some differences here in just a little bit. But then it will go through prophase 1, or prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2, and it will end up that you will have 4 genetically different daughter cells. Now this right here is specific to a female. A female produces all of her eggs in utero as she is developing inside of her mom. So she's born with all the eggs she will ever make. And as she goes through this process, so she starts off with the stem cell, once she finishes, even though there are 4 here, this one's a little bit larger, it will take the cytoplasm, the food from these 3, which makes it larger so that it can survive longer. And because these 3 have had their food removed, what are they about to do? They're going to expire. So even though there are 4 made, only 1 will survive. Only 1 will have the opportunity to be fertilized. Big picture. Okay? And those eggs, as I mentioned, are all stored inside her ovaries before she is even born. Males, on the other hand, they don't begin to produce sperm until they hit puberty, and they don't stop until they expire. They again start with the stem cell. They go through interphase and replicate the genetic material. They go through meiosis 1, meiosis 2, same exact setup where I have 4 genetically different daughter cells, but each of those will manifest into a sperm. Each of these will manifest into a sperm. So when we talk about how much sperm a male can make, there's truly no way to quantify that because it just depends on how long he's alive. And the sperm he starts to produce today will not be mature enough to fertilize for about 6 to 8 weeks. It takes that long for him to go through this process. And we want it to happen very slowly. Because even though he produces, let's say, 3 million or 3 billion sperm at one point, we want them all to be good sperm because there's a chance that just one of them will do what? Fertilize an egg. We want the one that fertilizes the egg to be in good shape. Because if all 3 billion actually fertilized an egg, we would have an issue. Okay? Now, while we're talking numbers, let's talk about female numbers. So just roughly stating, she probably has around 500,000 eggs when she's born. By the time she hits puberty, that's cut in half. So around 250,000 eggs. But again, what would she do with 250,000 kids? I mean, that's just not a thing, okay? But this is natural selection. We started off, and 500,000 is just a number that I'm kind of pulling. We started off, and then by the time she hit puberty, over half of them disintegrated. They ran out of food. And let's say she hits puberty, so then she ovulates once a month for 25 years. So 12 months times 25, we're roughly around 300 eggs that she's ovulated. And she had 250,000 to pull from. When a woman hits menopause, it's because she has no eggs left to pull from. And as she's aging, those eggs will disintegrate because they run out of food. Numbers-wise, she can't make any more. He can continue to make sperm the rest of his life. Okay?
How does
So this cell here would take all the cytoplasm from these, and that cytoplasm will allow that cell to live for a certain amount of time. And when that cytoplasm runs out, and that's a real quick explanation. There's a little bit more detail to it, but ultimately that's what it is. Okay? So this manifestation of egg and sperm, although the process is the same, we only end up with one viable egg and yet 4 viable sperm. Terms to know. And I want you to spend a moment and get these, because this is me adding again. But there's a huge difference in how much you can understand when you understand just the vocabulary. I'm going to start with somatic cells. Somatic cells are any cell in your body that is not a gamete. Any cell in your body that is not a gamete is referred to as somatic. What are some examples of somatic cells? Skin, bone, liver, kidneys. Those are all somatic cells. Any cell in your body that is not a gamete is considered somatic. And because they're somatic, they have 2 sets of chromosomes. So is that diploid or haploid? Diploid. Fantastic. So mitosis or meiosis? Mitosis. Somatic cells go through mitosis. Then there's gametes. Gametes are your sperm or egg cells. How many sets of chromosomes do they have? 1. So is that diploid or haploid? Haploid. So mitosis or meiosis? Meiosis. So first distinguishing between the 2 types, the 2 general cell classes, somatic and gametes. Most people are pretty solid on that. It's when we get into autosomes and sex chromosomes that there's a little loop that gets thrown in there. Okay? So, how many chromosomes are in each of your cells? 46. Fact. How many paired? 23 paired. Okay? Last week, when we were going through, I told you how they were organized in order from largest chromosome to smallest chromosome, and we call that a karyotype. But we number our pairs 1 to 23. Chromosomes 1 through 22 are considered autosomes. Chromosomes 1 to 22 are considered autosomes. They control a lot of different things in your body, a whole lot. There's thousands of genes. But if you're chromosome 1 all the way through chromosome 22, you are considered an autosome. An autosome. Which cells in your body have chromosomes 1 through 22? All your... So do you see where people kind of get confused here? All of your chromosomes are in every cell. Now there's 2 classes of cells, somatic and gametes, but all of them have DNA. All of them have your chromosomes. So chromosomes 1 through 22 are found in every cell in your body. Chromosome pair number 23 is what we call our sex chromosomes. Those chromosomes are responsible for determining the sex of a child. They don't have thousands of genes, they have a couple hundred genes. Okay? Still super important. Very important. But they're referred to as our sex chromosomes, chromosome set 23. And if you're a male, your chromosome set 23 is different than if you are a female. We know that females have 2 X's and males have an X and a Y. So when a female goes to make an egg, what options does she have? 2 X's. So all of her eggs will have X's, because that's all she has. 100% of her eggs will have an X, because that's all she can throw. But what about a male with his sperm? 50% of his sperm are female, 50% of his sperm are male. He can throw an X or a Y because he has both. So now that you know that, which one determines the sex of the child? The male, wholeheartedly. It is the sperm that determines the sex of the child. Now, the time in which the sperm is introduced also helps determine the sex of the child. If the sperm is introduced right after ovulation, remember I mentioned that women can only get pregnant 24 to 36 hours out of a month. That's it. You have that window. If you engage in intercourse at the beginning of that window within those first 12 hours, or you engaged in intercourse before you ovulated, you will conceive a boy. If you conceive or engage in intercourse after that 12-hour window, you will conceive a girl. It has to do with the female's body temperature. When her body temperature is a little bit higher, she'll conceive a boy. When her body temperature is lower, she will conceive a girl. It is scientifically proven over and over and over again.
How is it possible to know what?
Great question. So how do you know? When people start talking about that ovulation tracker, that's what that is. You're tracking. Ovulation is when your ovary releases that egg. And you have about a day and a half before that egg leaves your body. And if that egg gets fertilized, you become pregnant. And if not, you'll menstruate. So you have, that's the only window you have to become pregnant. You can have sex every single day. But if it is not during that time frame, you will not conceive. So you ovulate right before you menstruate. So your body prepares every single month as a female to become pregnant. Your uterus gets ready, you release an egg. If that egg does not get fertilized, your body says, well, what the heck? It drops the egg, you release the egg, the uterus sheds the entire lining, which is what menstruation is, and then it starts to build it up again the next month. And you do this over and over and over again until you don't do it over anymore. Every single month, your uterus wants a new nursery built for that child. And if there's no child, it says, well, and it destroys everything. And then it starts over, painting the walls, bringing in the rocking chair, everything nice and neat. Does that every single month. And so you ovulate before you menstruate. If you become pregnant, there's no menstruation because you want to leave the nursery the way it is. But if you do not become pregnant, it shreds that nursery, throws a fit, your hormone levels drop, and you seem crazy for a couple days. People are like, what's wrong with her? She doesn't even know. She doesn't even know. She can't even explain it. But that's what's going on. Her hormone levels have fluctuated. So, with that being said, right before you ovulate as a female, and this is a complete anatomy lesson / this is how you don't get pregnant, a female will release a scent prior to ovulation that males pick up on. And if you don't believe me, you can become a people watcher. You can join me at high school and just watch these people. And how do I know? Because normally a lot of girls walk alone, but when she's ovulating, there's a friend walking with her. And he doesn't know why he's more attracted to her that day. She doesn't know why. She's like, oh, I must be cute today. She is ovulating, and he has picked up on that scent. Now, I don't know what he's thinking because I'm not a boy, but hopefully he's not thinking like, oh my gosh, I hope we get pregnant because, you're 14. But during that time, she releases a scent. He picks up on it, and he wants to hang around her. And he's flirting with her. But once that scent goes away, and he's like, oh, she's cool. I mean, she's... And It's like that, and it is 100% biochemically driven by your scent. With that also being said, because your males are more attracted to you before and during your ovulation, you're more prone to get pregnant during that time. So you are more likely to engage in sex when you have released that scent and somebody is more attracted to you because they're going to pay more attention to you. And you're going to like that attention, and then you're going to get knocked up. So when I see those young men following those young ladies, I'm like, No. Long term in your life, though, you won't be able to maintain a relationship with someone that you don't like the way they smell. You are initially attracted to them physically most of the time, and the smell that they portray to you is usually like a cologne, a deodorant, or a perfume that they like. They like the way it smells, so they put it on themselves. Usually, initially, you're all excited about being around them, but after about 3 or 4 weeks, you actually smell them without a cologne or a deodorant or perfume. If you don't like the way that they naturally smell, you find something wrong with them that you didn't realize before. And your brain triggers and says, they don't like this smell. And so you start nitpicking and fighting. I'm telling you, I would rather you figure it out now. I can't stand the way you smell. Because if not, you try to push something that maybe isn't there. Because if you don't like the way they smell, that's going to be tumultuous. All right? Male and female. 100% male and female. And it's a legitimate breakup text. Natural scent. Not ovulatory scent. They're natural smell. You are only attracted to people that have a certain smell. And certain people have similar smells. Genetically, they produce that smell. So you'll notice that you're attracted to a certain type of person because you like that smell. Yeah, you never knew that. But quick text message, it's not you, it's your smell. It's over. And it's legit. And you can even say, I had this professor one time who told me that. I know you don't know her, but I believe her. And right now, everything you do is making me mad. So you must smell bad. It's not your fault. It's your DNA.
Is that allowed after you're married?
Yeah, so, it's natural once you have a relationship, but you'll notice that you're willing to work through things with somebody that you like their scent versus somebody you don't. It's more volatile when you don't like their scent. Oh, when you're pregnant, your hormonal levels make you more sensitive to smells that are around you. Yes, ma'am.
Small thing that's supposed to keep you away from dating your cousin.
Yeah. There are certain smells that you are revolted by. Yes. And that's the goal. That's nature's way of trying to get you to go outside of your genetic makeup. Yes, you are 100% correct. So you shouldn't be attracted to your same smell. I guess some people are, but you shouldn't be. That's a good point. Yes. So let's talk about where I can find genetic material. Last week when I showed you this, I said this is a karyotype. This is where we've taken your chromosomes and we put them in order from largest to smallest, so 1 through 22. And then we put your sex chromosomes here at the bottom. This is chromosome pair 23. So your chromosomes look like this inside of your nucleus. They're all disorganized. And I said in the old days we would cut this out and paste it, but now there's a computer program that'll put this all together for you. And then you can tell whether you have a girl or a boy and what chromosomes are missing or extra or if there's any abnormalities. What cells in your body have this makeup? All cells. Every cell in your body has all of these chromosomes. But how are gametes different? Because I know that's where the struggle is. How are gametes different?
Your reproductive cells.
They don't have 2 sets. They only have 1. Okay? They don't have 2 sets. So they don't have 1 from mom, 1 from dad, 2 from mom, 2 from... They just have 1 of each. They have half the number. Okay? And whether they got mom or dad's, that's completely random. But the gametes are different. They still have all the genetic material. It's just one set, not two. Okay, so all of your cells have all the genetic material. It's just the amount of genetic material that's manipulated. One has two sets, the diploid cells have two sets, the haploid cells have one. So inside your cell, you have a nucleus. How do I know that all of your cells have a nucleus? Not all cells have a nucleus, but how do I know you? You're eukaryotic. Yes, that's how I know you have a nucleus. And inside your nucleus are your chromosomes. And this is not my favorite picture, but it gets my point across. First of all, why do I not like this makeup of a chromosome? It shows that they're crossing. And you and I both know that they're just super close. What's that force called? Centromere, yes. Okay, centromere. So then you have your chromosome, and these dark lines represent genes, okay? So your chromosomes with your genes are wrapped up, that's your DNA, and your DNA, small segments of DNA are called genes. Like, it's all the same thing. People just get tripped up. They're like, oh, wait, that's a gene. Oh, wait, no, it's your chromosome. But your genes are in your chromosomes. I just want you to kind of see how it all fits together. So that when you speak about it or when you read a question about it, you're not, oh my gosh, it's talking about DNA, what about chromosomes? DNA is your chromosomes. Your chromosomes are your DNA, which have your genes, and they're all located in your nucleus, which is inside of your cell. Anyone need clarification there? Homologous. You already know homologous means I have the same chromosome, just from a different source. I have the same chromosome, but from a different source. So like chromosome 1 from mom, chromosome 1 from dad. Chromosome 2 from mom, 2 from dad, and so on. The term here I really want to hone in on is alleles. Alleles. So when you get chromosome, and I'm just picking a chromosome, but let's say you get chromosome 1 from mom and chromosome 1 from dad, and on that chromosome, there's one gene, and I'm going to go back so I can show you a gene real quick. So you get chromosome 1 from mom, 1 from dad. On that chromosome, there's one gene from each parent. It's the same gene. Did you get a hair gene from mom? Yes. Did you get a hair gene from dad? Yes. Okay, so I have the two chromosomes, two genes. The alleles are your options for that trait. So what are some options for hair color? Blonde, black, brown, red, white, whatever. There's a lot of others, I'm sure. But the alleles are your option for that gene. So mom gave you a hair gene, dad gave you a hair gene. Perhaps mom's allele was blonde, dad's allele was brown. Whenever they first came together, they determined who was dominant. Guess what color hair you probably have? Brown. You probably have brown hair. If your mom had blonde, your dad had brown, those two alleles, more than likely you have brown. Now, could you possibly have blonde? Yes. And we'll talk about that in our next unit. But the alleles are your options for that. And just because I decide to show brown, and brown is dominant, doesn't mean I'm not carrying blonde. No, I am carrying it. It's just been turned off. When your genes are turned off, you don't see them, but they're still there. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my mom was born with blonde hair,
Mhm.
and for about 6 or 7 years she had blonde hair, but then now she has brown hair.
Mm-hmm. Totally normal. Hormones. Epigenetic inheritance. Yes. Yes. Totally normal. People are like, oh, I have this color eyes and now I have this. Or I had this color hair and now this. It has to do with hormones and their environment. Yes. So stuff like that can change. And you can be one way and then we can completely change your environment. And slowly I can change things about you. Yes, sir. Oh. So, great question. Do you have that gene? Oh. Yeah, so there might be an issue there. There might be an issue. Now, I did have a student say, so what if I did it early on when I was just a zygote? Okay, first of all, you couldn't do it if you were a zygote, but there is what we call genetic engineering. And genetic engineering says that I take one sperm and I take one egg, and I put them together in a petri dish / test tube type setup, and I let them fertilize. And then I go in and I turn certain genes on and certain genes off so that my kid looks the way I want it to. And then I take that baby and I implant it in the uterus so that it develops and I give birth to it. People are like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like if I really want this big, tall athlete, let me turn on the height gene and bone density and all of that, which is great. But that type of science costs you about $25,000 a cell. And if it doesn't implant, you don't have a baby. So you made it, and you introduced it trying to let it become implanted into the uterus so that you could actually carry it. But if it doesn't implant, then, which is the same thing we see with in vitro fertilization. So genetic engineering is a thing. You can kind of pick what you want your kid to look like. Just how specific and how successful really depends on your checkbook size. So buy a car, or my kid looks the way that I want it to look. Like $25,000 is a lot of money. And there's a lot of controversy around that. Like, so are you really just playing God? Like you just pick what you want your kid to look like? Yes, that's a lot of you mentioned that. And even in your last paragraph when it talked about religion, a lot of you said in this type of situation, people wonder, are you really taking on a role that you shouldn't be taking on? Like deciding what characteristics individuals have. But it does impact their fitness. And if you can impact their fitness, they can survive longer to reproduce. But then do we become genetically modified organisms? Because ultimately that would be what we are, huh? Because we went in and we genetically modified you. There's a lot behind that. It's a really good topic, though. So whenever we have our alleles are our choices, when we begin meiosis, we start out with diploid, which means I have 2 sets of chromosomes. And by the time meiosis is over, all of my cells should be haploid. Genetically different or genetically identical? Different. So meiosis has 2 divisions, meiosis 1, meiosis 2. And I highlighted right here, meiosis is referred to as reduction division because the ultimate goal is to reduce the number of chromosomes. We want the kiddos to be different, and we want to reduce the number of chromosomes so that when the gametes fuse, we can restore that number of chromosomes. When the gametes fuse, we can restore that number of chromosomes. So meiosis is referred to as reduction division. And there's 2 parts to meiosis, meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. How is mitosis different? They're identical. It applies to every other cell but your reproductive cell. And how many do I end up with? 2 daughter cells. Do they have more or less genetic material? The same. So it's not reduction division. It's the same. I'm making clones. So in mitosis, we're cloning. We want exact copies. In meiosis, we want different and less. We want a different combination and we want fewer chromosomes. So, I put this on here so you could see the difference in the stages. So, meiosis starts off with interphase, G1, S, G2, just like we started. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you already know what occurs there. Then, immediately after interphase, it begins prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, and telophase 1. I will point out that the only 2 differences are things that occur in prophase 1 and anaphase 1. And I put that there intentionally. After telophase 1 is done, there's this period of what we call interkinesis. Now, if you ask me, interkinesis sounds like interphase and cytokinesis combined. During this phase, the cell is just resting. It's just a quick rest. There is no interphase here. That's why it's not called interphase. It's called interkinesis. This was a division, kinesis, a movement in between these divisions. So I started with my stem cell. It went through interphase. Here I know meiosis has occurred, specifically prophase 1 has because crossing over. And then this is interkinesis, where it has split. This is an intermediate split. Do I replicate anything here? No. All I do now is go through prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2, and it will separate to each of these. So each of these just further separates. How many times does the cell divide? Twice. Meiosis 1, meiosis 2. And I end up with 4 genetically different haploid daughter cells. And of course, daughter because girls are better. I'm just kidding, but I'm not kidding. All right, so just an overview of each of the phases listed out. Again, the main differences, and I told you I just want to point out the differences, are going to be prophase and anaphase 1. So, prophase 1. The main event that happens here is what we call recombination. It's also called crossing over. Recombination and crossing over, same thing, occur during prophase 1. Occur during prophase 1. What this does is it's a random switching of chromosomes, parts of chromosomes. It could be a whole chromosome, but usually it's just parts of chromosomes. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about, of course. It's completely random. It may happen, it may not. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I had chromosome 1 from mom, chromosome 1 from dad. All right, then they went through interphase, so G1S, and what happens during S? DNA is replicated, synthesis. So now I have my sister chromatids, okay? And because this is a one-dimensional diagram, it appears that these are all side by side. In fact, it doesn't appear. They are clearly all just side by side. But in reality, what happens is these sister chromatids, during meiosis, actually they're not right here, they do this. They fuse to where for a moment there are 4 of them together. Does anyone know what tetra means? 4. So when we say a tetrad or a bivalent, that's what this is referring to. So they got really close like this, and just a little bit of them is switched. So I'm grateful that we've already talked about genes, because genes are just those lines. And whatever gene mom had, she replicated. Whatever allele dad had, he replicated. Okay? So now when they come together with crossing over, they're switching just a little bit, making that offspring just a little bit different. And then once they finish, they will separate. And so each setup has just a little bit random uniqueness to it. This is showing you with just one pair of chromosomes. But don't forget how many you actually have. You have 23 pairs, right? So when you start to think about all the different combinations that you can come up with, some of them may cross over, some of them may not. Some of them may cross over a whole bunch, and some of them may not. So you might have siblings that look really close to what you look like, except for you have freckles and they don't. Because it was just one allele that got switched around. Okay? The only way that you can have someone who has the exact same genetic material as you, even if you look very, very similar, is if they are your identical twin, and identical twins were one time just one baby. When they were really, really small, when they were first made, it was one baby. And then as the cell divided, it just kind of split off into 2. So they both have the exact same genetic material because they were made from the same sperm and same egg. It's totally different than having twins that are fraternal, which means mom didn't release 1 egg, she released 2. And 2 different sperm fertilized these 2 different kids that just happen to be inhabiting the same uterus at the same time. Okay, so the difference is there. I want to go back. So recombination is also called crossing over, and it occurs during prophase 1. Recombination is crossing over, and it occurs during prophase 1. Then the rest of this, there's only a couple other things for me to point out, but the rest of this is very similar to what we saw in mitosis, where your chromosomes condensed, okay, and then they attach themselves to spindles, the kinetochores did, the centrioles separated. Big difference is when it lines up for metaphase, I have 2 instead of a single file line. And I can see that there's a little of both colors here, which tells me that there's variation. One other thing that I want to point out that I didn't point out here. Crossing over adds this genetic variation. These other things play into this as well. Of course, crossing over is completely random. I even announced this or explained this in our very first lecture when I said we had 2 white moths at one point that reproduced, and they produced a white moth with black spots. Do you think that parent was like, oh, I really want a black and white baby? No. They didn't. It just happened randomly, and it just happened to be successful, so that baby survived long enough to reproduce. So it's completely random. The parental chromosomes, they assort randomly. So I have a blue allele for eye color. I have 2 blue alleles. So all of my eggs had blue. But every single one of my kids has brown eyes. And it's because my husband only has brown. And when you have brown and blue together, guess what's dominant? Brown. So do my kids have the allele for blue? It's just shut off. Now, when they go to make their gametes, what are their gametes going to look like? Half of them are going to be brown, half of them are going to be blue. So in my life, I have a chance of having a grandkid that has blue eyes. Because I only had 2 small B's. My husband only had 2 large B's. But all of our kids are capital and lowercase. So all my kids may not look like me, but my grandkids could. So I'm grateful for that. I mean, that's completely random how that will be assorted. When my kids go to make their gametes, their sperm and eggs, half of them will be brown, half of them will be blue. The joining of sperm and egg is completely random. There is 1 egg. And in one ejaculation, there may be anywhere from 150 million to 2 billion sperm. And the female's body tries to kill the sperm immediately. Immediately. The female is killing sperm. And as the winners continue to ascend the reproductive tract, there are white blood cells acting like ninjas, knocking them off. So how in the world? There wasn't a winner picked from the beginning. They were all fighting. And even at the same time, there was around 100 of them trying to penetrate that egg at the same time. So if in your life you have never won anything, no. You were a winner at one point, okay? You were the winning sperm. You're welcome. You're welcome. Leave with your medal today, okay? And of course, this variety increases our chances of survival. The second difference is during anaphase 1, and the process is called nondisjunction. You and I have already pre-taught this, but just to remind you, when you have your chromosomes, so you started off, let's say, with 4. When it went through synthesis, now how many do I have? 4 more, because I made a copy. And then I told you in metaphase, they always line up so that each new cell gets exactly the same. What nondisjunction explains is why some cells get more than others. Nondisjunction says that they don't separate the way they were supposed to. Nondisjunction says that these chromosomes stuck together. So this gamete has more genetic material than this gamete. And all of that's perfectly fine unless that gamete is a winner. And why is that an issue? Then you have the extra chromosomes, or you're missing chromosomes when you go to conceive that baby. So what happens to that baby? It's either miscarried or it survives with issues. So nondisjunction explains why we have an abnormal number of chromosomes in some cells. And like I said, this doesn't even matter if you're not having to try to have a kid. But if you are trying to have a kid and you have sperm that have too many chromosomes or eggs that don't have enough chromosomes or vice versa, and those are the winners, you have a baby with complications. Okay? It is 100% random. We do see, however, in females, the chances of non-disjunction increase with age. The longer she waits to have kids, the more likely. Now, it doesn't mean that you will, but the conditions are more favorable for non-disjunction to occur with a female's age. So here, again, I mentioned that there's the 2 lined up here in the center, and you can tell that this is meiosis because crossing over has occurred. There's a little bit of a change there, genetic variation. Anaphase is the same, telophase is the same. Then it goes through this interkinesis, which means like a temporary rest, but it's still separating those cells. Prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2, the same as they were before. Okay? Nothing new there. So then you have them. They went through that interkinesis. Now here's prophase 2, prometaphase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, and then after telophase 2, you have 4 genetically different haploid daughter cells in meiosis. Mitosis is different because we start off, we line them up in a single file, we separate them, and when we're finished, we have 2 genetically identical daughter cells. We just cloned that parent cell. Again, meiosis allows for crossing over. Okay, so the exchange of genetic material. And there are 2 divisions in meiosis where, again, we end with 4 genetically different haploid daughter cells. This is what increases our chances of survival. Meiosis only occurs in gametes, whereas mitosis occurs in all somatic cells. What questions do you have? All right. We are done today.